Okay, this is going to be a really quick lesson on changing percents to decimals. And you probably did this in 6th grade, so this may be more of a review than anything. So let's go with a percent that we know pretty easily. If you have 25%, that's going to have the decimal value of 0.25. Let's look at what we did. Let's break that down. So let's bring down our 25%. And this time I'm going to write it just slightly differently. And that slightly differently is I'm going to put the decimal point in. Normally when we have a number that's a whole number, we don't show a decimal point. If somebody said, "How old are you?" or "Write your age," you probably wouldn't write this. You wouldn't write, "Oh, I'm 12." You would just write, "I'm 12." So when we write a number that is a whole number, we don't usually put a decimal. I'm going to put that decimal, though, so we can see what happens. I'm going to rewrite as the percent, and I'm going to show you where the decimal ends up. Notice that what happened was the decimal that was here moved up 2 places to get here in the new number. So again, let me go back and show that slightly differently. The decimal in the original number was here, and it moved up 2 places. Moving a decimal over 2 places is really multiplying by 100. That's how a decimal point moves. You might remember from 6th grade, your teachers taught you about butt cheeks. Remember, butt cheeks, that 2-butt move. Got to have 2 butt cheeks. If you have 1 butt cheek, you fall over. So let's do a couple more. 17%. What will that look like as a decimal? Well, the decimal's right here to start with. It's going to move over 2. Again, think of those butt cheeks if that helps, which means it's going to end up right here. And it moved over 2 places. It started back here, moved over twice. That move 2 is true no matter what the original percent is. So you have to be careful. On percents like 5%, the most common mistake is to write that as 0.5, but it's really 0.05. Because again, that decimal point had to move 2 times. It had to move from here over to there. If you have a percent bigger than 100%, well, let's just take 100% actually. Let's take 100%. How much is 100%? Well, it's 1 whole. 1 whole. Decimal point for 1 whole is right there. In our 100%, it was right here. And just like the others, it moved twice. Lastly, let's look at what happens if you have a decimal bigger than 100%. Let's say you had 132%. Well, the decimal in 132% is right there. So what will it look like after the move? Well, we'll still have the same 1, 3, and 2, and the decimal point now will be between the 3 and the 1 because it started out at the end and it moved twice. So there's your quick lesson on changing percents to decimals, and we use that a lot as we move into discussions not only about finding percents, but also about calculating interest, figuring out tips and taxes and discounts, all those places where we're given a percent, but when we want to use it, we have to use it with the decimal value. Okay, so now, why don't you go ahead and practice. Do these 6 problems. Go ahead, pause the video, do the 6 problems, then we're going to come back together and I'll go through the answers to those 6 problems with you. So pause, give those 6 problems a shot. All right, so let's go through and work these 6 problems out. In the first problem, we have 29%. The decimal point that we don't see sits right there. We know that we have to move the decimal 2 places. So it's going to move from behind the 9 all the way to in front of the 2, which means in our final decimal value, it will look like that, 0.29. Now, at any point, as we're going through this, if you did some of these wrong and you realize it and you think, oh, I could fix those, pause the video, fix them, and then turn it back on. 8%. Well, 8% decimal point is right here. Anytime you see a single percent, you know you're going to have to add an additional zero. There is what 8% looks like as a decimal. That decimal point moved from behind the 8 all the way up front. Moved 2. Just like here, moved from behind the 9 all the way up front. Move 2. How about 63%? Well, again, decimal point's right there. We know it's going to have to move 2 places, so we're going to have 0.63. Our decimal moves between the 0 and the 6. Came 2 places from behind the 3. 147, this is one of those special cases. So the decimal starting here, and when it moves its 2 places, there's still a number in front of it. So we don't need to add any zeros. We're going to have the 147. Notice the numbers don't change. The digits we use don't change. The location of the decimal point is what changes. Here again, it came up from behind the 7, moved up 2 spots. 3%, okay, like the 8%, that's one where we know we need that extra 0. We know we moved the decimal from behind the 3 up 2 spots, and we need that 0 right there as an extra placeholder. That's what we did here at 8%. We had an extra placeholder. And then finally, 12%, we go back to a spot where it's kind of a standard one. There's where the decimal is now. We're going to move it up 2 places, so it's going to move up between the 0 and the 1. There's its location. Came from back here, up its 2 spots. Okay, so you should be ready now for changing percents to decimals. You had some practice, you can feel confident, and you're ready to tackle percent problems where changing it to a decimal is going to make it easier to use, either solving it by hand or solving it with a calculator.